Welcome to this tutorial. My name is Ian and I will be taking you through the tutorial. So my thanks if you've been following the series of tutorials. We've covered quite a bit of ground so far with what ChatGPT can do. Hopefully you've been quite amazed by using quite straightforward, simple English statements on what can be achieved by asking ChatGPT to do your data analysis. In this tutorial, we're going to continue with that. We're going to look at some trend analysis. We're going to be looking at our trend lines, looking at a little bit of analysis. And then I'm going to get into a little bit of calculations. I always find that doing a bit of time intelligence calculations are always really interesting, but often with a lot of systems are quite difficult to do due to the formulas you need to know. So let's say, for example, you want to know what was my sales for the last 7 days, or you want to know what was the sales for the previous month, or what was the sales in comparison between 2 years. We're going to see that by asking these questions of ChatGPT, you can actually do it really easily. Now please remember that you do need the paid version to be able to follow along with this. Also, please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, keep up to date with all our latest content. And having said all of that, I will see you in the tutorial. Welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to be looking at how we can use ChatGPT to do some trend analysis for us and also some date calculations. Okay, so we've got our standard data spreadsheet that we've been using in the previous tutorials. So please, if you want to look at the data in a little bit more detail, have a look at those previous tutorials. But basically, we've got some sales data. We've got about 8,399 rows of data. And this data goes over several years worth of time. Okay, so the first step is we're just going to load the data into ChatGPT. And I'm going to ask it to list the field names. Just fix that. Okay, so there we go. It's going to give us a listing of the different field names. And the two that we're going to be really interested with here is our order date and our sales. So we're interested in trends. We're interested to see if the data is trending upwards or trending downwards, or is it just consistent across, or is it got volatility? It's a number of things that you can pick up from trends. But let's start off with the standard management report. And often what we want to see in a management report is we want to see what is the sales values by our year and month. So let's start with that. So let's tell it we want to create a table displaying sales by year and month. And in this case, I'm going to tell it to place month in the column. Also, I'm going to tell it to format this. So we're going to say format 1000 separators. And I don't want any decimal values. Okay, so we're going to create a table displaying the sales by year and month, place the month in the column, format the 1000 separators and no decimals. Okay, so as you can see, the table's starting to be built, but we can actually see that unfortunately the month names are not in the correct order. So that's something we're going to look at in the next step and see if we can just fix that so we can get it in the chronological order. However, we do have the year and we've got the months, and go across here, you'll see that you've got your months. So let's just say that we want to say update the sort order for month to be chronological. Okay, so that looks much better now. It looks like we've got the year, we've got the month, and it looks like it's going to put the month in the correct chronological order. So that's a nice example just to show you when ChatGPT doesn't maybe produce the results the way that you want, you can often get it to just do an update and to actually correct that. Often when you do this table, you will find that it will actually do the order of the months chronologically just by default. But we've now got that information, we've now got our data, and we can start to see that there's some trends between our years over the different months. But what if you wanted to see this as a line chart? So let's say we wanted to see a line chart and we just wanted to see the values for by month for a specific year. So we can tell it to create a line chart. And I'm going to tell it to display the sales by month. And let's just say for year 2021. Okay, so we're just going to do it for 1 year. And then we're going to ask it now to actually add a linear trend line I'm also going to tell it to format the y-axis to start at 0. Sometimes it doesn't format the y-axis to start at 0, so it starts at a much higher value. So we're just going to say format the y-axis to start at 0. Okay, so there's our prompt now. Let's see how ChatGPT deals with that. Okay, so there we go. That looks pretty good, actually. We have got the y-axis actually starting at 0. And as you can see, it then goes up. And then we got our different values by month. And as you can see from the trend line, it's showing us that we actually have a bit of a positive trend line going upwards for the year. So there we go. We can easily get a trend analysis line chart from ChatGPT. Now, another one that we might want to look at is, for example, is what happens with our sales over, say, different weekdays. So do we have more sales on a Monday than we have, say, on a Friday? And this could help us with knowing what resources we actually need on a daily basis. So let's ask it to create a column chart. And we'll say column graph. I'm going to ask it to display the sales by weekday. And let's also just say for year 2021. And let's just accept that. Okay, so there we go. That looks great. It's even got it in the correct chronological order, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we can see the amount of sales that we got on each of the days. And as I said, if you were doing this type of analysis, you might want to then decide on how much resources you need on a daily basis. Now, one thing just to watch out for with this, if you were doing this type of analysis, is make sure that you would have specific dates in there to filter by. So you've got the same number of Mondays as you do of Saturdays or Sundays. So you've got to have the right amount of data. But you can just add a filter in there and just say, do it between this date and this date, and you would then be able to display that chart. Okay, I'm going to move on to some date calculations. I always find date calculations are really interesting when you do an analysis. One of the date calculations I really enjoy doing is to say what happened in the last 7 days, or what happened in the last 30 days, or what happened in the last 3 months, is to be able to do that type of analysis. Now, because our data is fixed in time and we've got the data ended quite a bit from today's date, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually say to it, what is the last date in the table? And then we're going to use the last date in the table to be able to do the calculations and say, what was the last 7 days of sales? Or what was the last 3 months of sales? So let's see what that is. So I'm going to just ask it, first of all, what is the last date in the table? Okay, so we're going to be dealing with December 22nd, 2022 as the last date. So assuming that I wanted to know what happened in the last 7 days, I'm just going to tell it to say what was the total sales for the last 7 days from the last date. So we're going to use that last date as a placeholder. But obviously, if you were dealing with real-time data, you could say what was the sales for the last 7 days, for example. So we're just going to say what was the sales for the last 7 days, and we're going to say from, in this case, the last date, just to give it that as a reference. And there we go. It now gives you a total for those last 7 days. And as I said, you could change this if you wanted to know what was the sales for the last 3 months. You could just type that in. And again, I'm just going to say from last date. So there we go. It even tells you from 3 months before what is the date that it's using as a reference date and what the amount was for that period of time. So that's really useful. You can also just tell it to calculate for a specific period. So I could tell it to calculate the sales for, and in this case, let's say the 1st of September 2021 to 31st of October 2021. So you could just give it a date period and ask it to calculate from that. And there we go. It gives me now the total for that time period. Also, we can maybe tell it that we want to know what happened, say, in the previous month. So let's say we want to calculate the sales for the previous month from, and in this case, I'm going to use the last date as the reference. And there we go. It now tells me it covers November 2022, amounted to approximately around $236,000. So as you can see, really easy to ask some different date calculations. So I've got one last one for the tutorial, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say compare the sales by month for 2021 and 2020. We want to create a table to display the difference between each month. Okay, so let's pop that in there. We're going to say create a table displaying the sales by month and compare 2021 to 2020. And we're going to say that we want to calculate the difference between each month and also display the totals. Okay, so there we go. It's starting to get a bit of a result. And we can see we've got each month, we've got the sales for 2020 and we've got the sales for 21. And it's now calculated the difference between each of those months, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. And it's even got the months in the right chronological order as well. And hopefully as we go down, there we go, we've now got the totals for each of the years, and it shows me the difference month by month for each of those just through a plain statement. So there we go. There's hopefully another interesting tutorial on using ChatGPT to be able to do our data analysis. We're going to conclude the tutorials there, but I do look forward to seeing you in the next one.